Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and today we're talking a lot of sports. And I know you usually think, well, you usually talk a lot of sports. Well, today it's different. You got the Nets, you got the Islanders, you got the big signing, head coach signing there in New York with the Rangers getting Gerard Gallant coming in. The Yankees, Mets, Cubs, White Sox. We're talking baseball again. Going to be a big episode today. Excited for it. Swig, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I was, had a good weekend. I was excited. I was able to go back to Milwaukee, visit some friends, see a baseball game. It kind of felt normal again, just to have some beers in a parking lot. I can't tell you how much I miss something simple like that, So it was definitely a nice little break. I feel a little bit recharged and ready to attack this big episode we got planned.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, you saw first place baseball there too with the Brewers. They're doing well right now in first place, and going on in Milwaukee at the same time was the Bucks and the Nets. And the Nets right now are a team that's playing pretty solid basketball. They lost Kyrie Irving, had the injury to the ankle. That was pretty serious. They bring back James Harden though for Game 5. And that was a huge decision made by the staff to bring him in. Training staff, him personally, probably begging them a little bit to play. He looked a little off. He obviously wasn't as fast as he usually was on the court, but it was Kevin Durant who stepped up. Jeff Green stepped up. The Nets played great basketball in Game 5, and now they have a 3-2 lead in the series.
Yeah, man. I'll start really quick with the Harden situation because obviously Durant is the main story of Game 5, and we'll give him his due that he's more than earned here in a second. But when Kyrie Irving, who my guess is will be out the rest of this series regardless with the rolled ankle, when he went down in Game 4, I believe, and was ruled out for Game 5, and Steve Nash originally said, "Yeah, we're not going to rush back James Harden, for Game 5." I called bullshit immediately. There's just no way. Now Harden's clearly not 100%. I get that. He only had 5 points, I believe, in Game 5. But it's like if you're the Nets, this is a playoff series that was tied. Milwaukee, frankly, blew Game 5, slowly but surely. You need to have at least two of the big three, if at all possible. And Durant clearly 100% right now. But even though Harden wasn't, he's missed all but the first couple minutes of the series before Game 5 with just the hamstring tightness. I don't think it was a serious enough injury that was going to say, oh yeah, with Kyrie out too, we're just going to leave him on the sideline and hope for the best. I never bought that. I never did. I knew Harden at the very least was going to try, because unlike when Durant had to come back in Game 5 of the NBA Finals with the more serious injury, I thought this was something that Harden was unlikely to make much more serious than it is. Worst case, he aggravated it and he's out for this series, not all of the following season like Durant was. But anyway, Durant put the team on his back with a ridiculous Game 5 performance, playing all 48 minutes, a 49-point triple-double. Jeff Green was also superb with 27 points. And I think the real message here is we got to bring back more members of the 2007 Sonics. Where's Nick Collison at?
Oh, Nick Collison. I don't know where he's at. He was a great basketball player, Nick Collison. You look at his career, that dude was just solid. He was always there. He was a sixth man. He started a little bit when he needed to, and he was just a great basketball player. Not flashy by any means, but he was solid. So maybe they can give him a phone call, see what he's doing nowadays. But anyway, looking at the series, to your point about the Kevin Durant injury in the postseason for the Warriors, he had that. It was like the Achilles issue that ended up happening because of the calf strain. And those are two things. Anytime you have a calf, it really becomes an issue as you go down, and that could really pay dividends. Right now, a hamstring, you tweak it, yeah, you're going to miss a little bit of time. But to your point, that was a good point there about James Harden and the hamstring. But I thought Jeff Green also played well with 7 of 8 from downtown. That was big numbers. You probably didn't expect the 3-point numbers that high. But right now, the Nets are sitting pretty, and I think Game 5 was a huge swing, and they could potentially win the series.
Oh, it was a pivotal game because at this time last week when we recorded, the Nets blew out the first 2 games. I honestly thought they were going to coast to a 4 or 5 game series win, and that did not end up happening. Game 3, just, me personally, I kind of love those defensive slugfest type of games because that's what I grew up watching as a kid in the NBA. And Game 3 was that 86-83 old fashioned kind of 2004 Pistons era style of game. And I really liked it just as a fan, but Milwaukee was able to claw it out at the end and get back in the series. series before having their best game overall in game 4, I would say, where they were able to control that one and win by double digits. And then game 5 rolls around and Milwaukee gets off to a fantastic start, but Durant and company slowly chip away at the lead. And there's a question I wanted to ask and get your input on, because I watched a good chunk of game 5, and well, Durant was obviously, he's KD and he's going to get some points regardless, but he was absolutely dominating. It was his best performance overall, I'd say, in years. We haven't seen him need to take over like that since, I'd argue, since he was on the Thunder. So if you're the Bucks, PJ Tucker, Chris Middleton are guarding him for the most part. Why did they not? Why do you think they didn't put Giannis on him defensively, or do you think they should have? Because that never happened.
I don't think Giannis can stick with him. I know that they have the right size, but Giannis is not known as this elite defender right now. I mean, he's good at driving to the rim. That's his main thing. He's a great slasher. Questionable when he comes to shooting the basketball, especially from 3-point range. But I don't think Giannis is a good enough defender to stick with Kevin Durant. I mean, Durant has the little shifty moves that go left and right, and I don't think his lateral quickness is well enough to guard someone like a Kevin Durant. So I know PJ Tucker got absolutely roasted when he was put on him. They got to find a way to shut down Kevin Durant, but I don't think Giannis is the answer there.
I think I think it would have at least been worth a shot, because the guys they were trying weren't, and Giannis was, an MVP twice and a defensive player of the year candidate and winner, I believe, of the award in the past. And he's a guy who obviously has ridiculous length and is able to contest shots and block shots better. So while that's not going to stop Kevin Durant from making too many threes, it's just, I do think it would have at least been worth trying, because you're watching the game and you can see the game slowly slipping away from Milwaukee. I kind of saw it coming in the second quarter, really, even though they didn't start to really chip away until the third. You could just kind of see it as a fan. You could see Durant taking over. He was the best player on the court without question. But when you can sense that slipping away, I feel like Milwaukee in a really pivotal game 5 where the series is tied and they had a chance to win and go back to try to clinch the series at home. I feel like they should have at least gone down swinging a little bit more, because just throwing at the same couple of guys at Durant that were getting cooked all game, well, eventually it became a fully cooked goose and they lost. So, anyway, credit to Brooklyn. They did not back down. They really got that superhero performance every minute played. It was awesome. They have a chance to win the series in Milwaukee tomorrow night or tonight when this drops. So I like the timing of that, but it'll be a really tough game. I expect it to be a physical battle, kind of like game 3 a little bit, because I do not see Milwaukee being that passive in terms of their defense in game 6.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of defense, let's over to the Islanders, talk about their series a little bit. The New York Islanders, game 1, they look pretty solid. 2-1 victory there. And then it got to game 2. And that's where you really saw it sort of not necessarily unravel, but things the Lightning made an adjustment. And usually that's something John Cooper doesn't do a good job of, or what he was burned with in the past. Now, he did make an adjustment last year in the playoffs, which ended up winning the Stanley Cup. But this year, I mean, Andre Vasilevsky made a save that was otherworldly. I mean, he shut the door on the doorstep, leg in the air, glove out, just a fantastic save. And when you're getting saves like that from your goaltender, you're going to win a lot of hockey games. Semyon Varlamov took a big hit and knocked him out just a little bit. He came back later in the second period, and it seemed like he was just a tad off, but what you can expect that with getting knocked around in the head a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you got one of the main storylines of this series are the twin V's in goal, and they have both been fantastic. Yeah, now, in all honesty, game 1, yeah, I was in Milwaukee, so I didn't really get to watch that one. I went back and reviewed it after the fact. So from what I saw, watching kind of a replay of the game, the Islanders aren't really a team that's going to dominate on the scoreboard too often. They don't have a ton of offensive dynamic talent. That's as close as they're going to come to dominating a game. I know they only won by 1, but it really felt to me like they were in pretty good control of the situation. They did an outstanding job limiting Tampa's chances in game 1, especially off the rush, and they forced the Lightning into several turnovers. One of them eventually became the Barzal goal. They really did a great job capitalizing and maximizing what they do best. And Varlamov outdueled Andre Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky, who gave up a pretty iffy goal that ended up being the winner for the Islanders. And yeah, kudos to them. Yeah, they're following that successful formula, and you shouldn't blame them. But you kind of figure Tampa's too talented of a team offensively to only score one goal every game. That's not going to happen. And they did make an adjustment, like you said. And the Islanders, I thought in game two, were slightly sloppy in their own end, especially on the first and third goals from the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I don't expect that to be a norm for the series either. The Islanders are way too good defensively for that. But we have seen each team struggle with something they usually don't in each game of the series.
I was on the record last week, and I think that I said that the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to sweep them. I'm pretty sure that's what I said here on this show. I said Tampa Bay is going to sweep them. And I need to stop betting against these Islanders, because every single time I do, they come back and say, "Shut up, I'm winning hockey games." And I'm going to say it right now. I truly believe that they're going to win this series. But the thing that really questions me is the health of Semyon Varlamov. I know he tested he got the protocols. He was good through those. But I think how he plays in game three is, I don't want to draw this comparison because I know Tuukka Rask had a very serious injury and he ended up needing surgery to repair. But I think it's the way that you saw Tuukka Rask go from game five to game six. That's where I think it's going to be a big move here for Semyon Varlamov if he can continue that play, because Sorokin hasn't seen the net in just a little bit. He could be a little bit rusty, and against a team like Tampa Bay, that could really cost you a series.
No question. If there is an injury like that, and hell, we didn't even get into that with the NBA talk too much outside of Kyrie, because Kawhi Leonard's hurt now and Chris Paul's in the protocols. But keeping it on hockey here, if Varlamov, really quick though, can we talk about the play where he was taken out due to the concussion spotter? Because the New York Saints and the officiating got involved again. And I wanted to talk about one call that led to each team scoring the goal they didn't deserve. On the play where Varlamov was forced to leave for a few minutes or the rest of the first period, Braden Point was clearly shoved into Varlamov, and Point was called for a penalty. The Islanders scored on the power play. Again, not trying to take anything away from them, but that was the wrong call. And then later in the game, Tampa scored a goal where they had 7 players on the ice. Yep. And that was allowed to count. And that was complete bullshit as well. So both teams, I understand the makeup call philosophy. Hell, we saw one NHL official lose his job for being caught saying it out loud. But the one Achilles heel I have watching these NHL playoffs every year is you see at least 5, 8, 10 questionable or just outright wrong calls that have a huge impact on the game throughout every series in the playoffs. And the further we get in here, we're down to the final 4 teams. Every mistake or every call is going to be magnified even more because there's that much more at stake. And regardless of who wins the series or who's the beneficiary, you don't want to see that being a deciding factor in the outcome.
Yeah, you don't at all. And it's tough. This has got to be something that Gary Bettman in the commissioner's office really needs to discuss in the offseason. I know that it's coming down right now, the postseason, Stanley Cup finals happening here soon. And it's probably too late to change the rules unless you're Rob Manfred, where you think you can change rules mid-season. But I think Gary Bettman, right now, he's got to find a way to just change this in the offseason to make sure that the officials just either more replays, more things that you can really see, and be okay with overturning a call or not enough evidence. You got to make sure that everything's clear. There's well enough angles, and you cannot miss these calls, especially in the playoffs with a magnitude of this big.
Right. It's just something that I think gets more and more important every year. And I'm not trying to take away attention from the 2 teams playing, or especially the one that we cover, but I don't think anyone can argue that it did have a major impact on game 2 on both teams, in fairness. But I understand why Barry Trotz was upset after the goal where Tampa clearly had too many guys on the ice. It's just, I don't like the idea of makeup calls. I mean, I understand why they're there, but firing the one official earlier this season is just making him a scapegoat for what's clearly been a league-wide problem for years. And I agree that Bettman needs to do something about it, but knowing what we know about the NHL, he won't. So anyway, bringing it back to hockey here, we saw Tampa get shut down a little bit more than usual in game 1. We saw the Islanders being a little bit more uncharacteristically sloppy in game 2. I'm really curious to see which team makes the better adjustment for game 3. If Tampa is able to control the pace of the game like they could in game 2, they're going to be impossible to beat. But if the Islanders are able to limit those chances off the rush where the Lightning really thrive, they will advance to the Stanley Cup Finals. I have no doubt.
Yeah, and like I said, my thing right there, that's Semyon Varlamov. That's going to be the deciding factor for me in the series. If he comes out, plays great goaltend or be a great goaltender, then they're going to end up winning that series. But let's talk about the hire that the New York Rangers made, and they ended up getting their head coach. You sort of teased it a little bit, and it's Gerard Gallant, who spent some time with Vegas, and also I'm drawing a blank where he spent time before. Was it Washington?
No, Florida, and he was also
Florida,
Columbus's coach
Florida.
back in the day.
Yeah, I was thinking mainly more Florida and Vegas, but I mean, the Rangers get a head coach, a veteran head coach. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not surprised. We talked about this when the Rangers had the exhausting week they did at the end of the season, where the entire front office was fired under pressure from the Rangers owner. And now that's a whole other can of worms. But it was clear that the mandate from ownership was Rangers need to get in the playoffs. And they thought that the best way to do that would be to get a established, experienced veteran head coach. Of those, since it was clear we were going to go for somebody like that, whether it was him, whether it was Rick Tocchet or Tortorella or Mike Babcock, whoever, I thought Gallant was the best option available under those criteria, if that makes sense. I still think that trying to speed up the timeline and get the Rangers in the playoffs is a short-sighted thing, and that it could very easily shorten whatever Stanley Cup window I'm hoping the Rangers have in the next 2 to 4 years, maybe. And I don't like that. If it works, great, obviously, but I'd rather have more chances at it just because I'm afraid I've seen Dolan screw these things up before. But in terms of Gallant stylistically, I do like him as a coach, and he, especially in Florida and in Vegas, considering that was an expansion team that he took to the Stanley Cup Finals in year one. There is one thing he does that is the most important thing a coach does, and that's he gets the most out of his players, especially the forwards. And considering all the Rangers' young and in some cases elite talent up front, that could absolutely be a fit.
I'm getting some deja vu, and I hear a comparison of what you talked about right there. I think we could clip it, go back a few months, and use the same things, and it applies here. This is the Knicks signing Tom Thibodeau 2.0, bringing in someone that you thought, okay, this is a veteran. He might speed up the playoff window. You're getting someone that's getting the most out of their players, a veteran head coach that's won in the postseason, at least some. And you're bringing them in, and this is an opportunity for them to potentially go on a not saying the Rangers are going on a run, but they might be sniffing the playoffs a lot quicker, or more quickly than you thought that they would with a hire like Alon.
I understand it. And yeah, it's funny you say that, or maybe this is the reason you did. Don't forget the Knicks and Rangers have the same owner,
There
the
we go.
same impatient owner who I'm sure wants his teams to get back in the playoffs so we can raise season ticket prices again.
Especially with
By
the
the way, shout
pandemic
out to
sorting to
everyone who has season tickets for the Knicks next year.
yeah, that's
They
nice,
got
but
back in.
it's
But
crazy
yeah,
because
and I think the logic behind the hires is the same. I really do. I do like that comparison. Now, in terms of the style of coaches themselves, Thibodeau absolutely does get the most out of his players as well, but he's definitely more known as the demanding disciplinarian, and Gallant has the reputation of being a more player-friendly coach. But the logic behind the hires is very similar. I agree with that. And one thing that I think we can expect to see from the Rangers, similar to what we saw in Florida. So with the Panthers, we saw the forwards really start to improve. And obviously, a lot of talent there, but we saw Barkov and Huberto and Vincent Trocek, and then on the back end with Aaron Ekblad, they got better and better under Gallant. And then in Vegas and Florida with Jonathan Marchessault, and then we saw the band of misfits there with William Karlsson and Riley Smith and guys like that, originally in Vegas, having career years under him. And he seems to be well known for he's not afraid to bench anybody. His time of ice distribution is better than I think David Quinn's or especially Vigneault before him was. So I do expect some of the Rangers' youngest, most talented players to get more consistent ice time, especially on the power play, which is great. He is known for not really holding a grudge. So somebody's benched, it usually doesn't carry over into the next game. So there are a lot of things I like about him. The Rangers, as much as they do have a talented team, they they could make the playoffs. I don't think that's impossible, but I don't think it's a guarantee either. I expect Gallant to bring over that same really up tempo, high risk, high reward kind of system that he's used with success before. So I think that'll lead to the Rangers being a better offensive team, especially at 5-on-5. But I also think it's going to lead to more turnovers. So we're going to see a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the Rangers have a really talented blue line. I think they're going to be a team that is capable of scoring 3 goals a game, but could give up 4 as well, despite the talent.
I'm excited. I think this is a heck of a hire. He's going to bring a different voice. I mean, anybody's better than Quinn, right? I think we both agree on that.
Well, I liked Quinn more than Vino for whatever that's worth, but yes, I was ready to be done with Quinn. And so considering the veteran coach that we were clearly going for, Gallant was absolutely my first choice of those available. The only other one we really had to interviewed was Rick Tocchet, and I guess I prefer him to Tortorella or Babcock. As sure as fuck don't want to bring Torts back, but Tocchet I wouldn't have been as thrilled with. I do like Gallant. I do have to throw this out there, though. While he was relatively successful with both Florida and Vegas, he lasted less than 3 years in both places. So how confident would you be that Gallant is going to be the Rangers coach for more than 3 years?
If I'm in Vegas and they ask me to bet on that right now, I'm saying he's going to be there longer than 3 years. I truly believe that because he's getting the most out of his players, or at least you can assume it. I can say this till I'm blue in the face. I'm not a believer in Capo Caco, but until maybe he can change him around a little bit. But there's so much young talent on this team that they're going to be built for the future. And if he can speed that up a little bit and start getting production from the younger players, they're going to be under contract longer, which means a longer winning success, which means a longer head coach tenure.
Well, we'll see about that. He had some initial success before and then was kind of abruptly fired. I know that in the past he's been known for not being the best at embracing the modern changes of the game, not being big on analytics. And I kind of thought that was interesting because Chris Drury, I know, is very, very reliant on the data and the analytics to build a team. So it is kind of interesting if that's true. Now, I'm hoping Gallant is a guy who has learned from some of the mistakes. He's an outspoken guy. I'm sure that'll fit in just fine in New York. I can attest to that. But I'm hoping that he's kind of learned from some of the things that ended up getting him run out of his previous stops. And you remember in Florida, he had to catch his own cab back to the airport after he got fired there. So I'm hoping we don't see anything quite that viral whenever his tenure ends here, unless it's a viral thing and then winning a Stanley Cup. But that's still at least a couple years down the line, regardless. There is a lot of young talent on this team. I fully expect the Rangers to be very active this offseason. There's an expansion draft coming up. There's the NHL draft coming up. And considering the mandate to try to make the playoffs now, the Rangers are going to make at least one big move. And the other question I would ask is, which former Vegas player do you think is more likely to end up with the Rangers, Ryan Reeves or Tyler Nosek?
Ooh, given that the Rangers want to get a bruising guy in there and someone with a history like Reeves, I think Reeves is that guy that comes to New York.
I honestly would be surprised if one of those two does not end up with the team. And considering it's clear after the whole Rangers Capitals bullshit from a couple months back that they want to get more physical, and Ryan Reeves can absolutely fit that bill.
Anyway, yeah, that's good. I mean, it brings more fight to your team. And you mentioned analytics earlier. You mentioned having a coach that you don't like. So let's go over to the Yankees, who are embracing analytics and have a manager that you do not like, and Aaron Boone. And this team right now, I look up and down the lineup and I see a similar lineup that I've seen for many years. Right-handed bats, not a lot of production. And I look at a team that is frankly lost when it comes to playing baseball games sometimes. I mean, the bullpen has been pretty good up to this point, and it seems like Chapman's had a few skids, little things going on as of late. But Jameson Taillon's been horrendous. The rotation has really been tested, and the Yankees team, they're not looking too well.
Yeah, first of all, that was a nice transition right there from the Rangers to the Yankees. It's
I
smoother than
appreciate it.
Caitlyn Jenner's, I'll tell you that.
Wow.
But you watch the Yankees. For the most part, I agree. They've been very, very frustrating to watch, especially offensively. Right? Offensively, they're about as satisfying as somebody who lasts 30 seconds in bed. If you are looking for efficiency, if you're looking for an Energizer Bunny type of situation, the Yankees are like the battery of a toy in a McDonald's Happy Meal. It's just been very brutal to watch. There have been a lot of problems. But there are two I want to get off my chest right away. The double plays have infuriated me. They've hit into 64, I believe, so far this season, which is way more than anyone else in the league. And almost worse is all the fucking outs on the bases. They have run into, I believe, 31 outs on the bases this year, which is, I think, eight more than the next most team. That's more than a game's full of outs just screwing up, running between second and third, or Tyler Wade getting thrown out at home whenever he pinch runs. That really pisses me off. I mean, are they watching Ruben Rivera and Jack Cust videos to try to score runs? Because it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, those would not be good examples if they're trying to score runs. But looking at this Yankees team, I know that I'm going off the walls here, but it's kind of true. They don't have a lot of speed on this team, and that could play a little bit into the ground balls and to why they're rolling into double plays or not beating them out. Now I know that you could point the obvious out, the issues on the bases. More with the issues on the bases, that's more mental than anything. So speed has little to do with that. But looking at, they don't have a lot of speed on this team. They used to have Granderson who could run a little bit. Gardner, when he was younger, had great speed. And you had guys that could move around. Right now, it's like a bunch of statues and nobody can move. And it's sort of, I mean, speed is an underrated facet, even in today's game of baseball, that you need some of it if you want to succeed. And they don't have any of it.
Yeah, it's definitely something, but I agree that the base running errors are more due to just lapses in judgment or stupidity rather than the lack of speed. Because Tyler Wade is one guy who can fly around the bases, and he's run into at least four of those outs on the bases himself. One of the few guys the Yankees had that could run a little bit was Mike Talkman, who's now in San Francisco and tearing it up. By the way, really good trade right before Aaron Hicks got hurt. Yeah, outside of Wade, it's Gardner who can still run pretty well, and Clint Frazier whenever he plays. It's definitely something the Yankees lacked for the most part. Now they're hovering just above the 500 mark at the time of recording. The offense has shown some signs of life recently. Gary Sanchez has had his best stretch in a couple of seasons. He's been really, really good lately, and I hope that continues because we know what he's capable of when he's swinging the bat well. He's obviously a streaky and inconsistent player, but when he is on, he can do some things that from the catcher spot offensively that few can match. So it is good to finally see him getting into a groove a little bit. And the other guy I wanted to single out, you know who's back as a regular in the Yankees starting lineup for the first time in a while? That's Miguel Andujar, who's doing it this time in left
Nice.
field.
Yeah, he's hitting 262 right now, which is not a bad average for someone that's been up and down a little bit the last few years. He had a great year in 2017, I want to say was the year that was, and I mean he showed up and hit the cover off the baseball when he played. But just trying to find the position for him, he's not that great defensively, so that can be a little bit of an issue. But I see this team, and we talked about them the last time we talked about the Yankees, we talked about the rotation being well. We had a guest on for that talking about the Yankees rotation being solid. Kluber was solid. He's now on the injured list. But you're looking at this Yankees, and what I see when I see them is we talked about how their rotation was good and you can get by with not scoring a lot of runs. But the Yankees offense is not built to where you can hit the cover off the ball the entire year. They go on runs. It's simple as that. When Judge is hot, you have another guy that's hot. And then when they're cold, someone else gets hot. And they're just a streaky offense. And that's not going to play if you can't get good pitching. And I think that could be a little bit of the problem here, too.
There's absolutely something to be said for that. Even with the Yankees were relatively successful in the regular season in 2018 and 19, winning 100 games each that year, that was still the biggest issue, right? Where they're not going to be a consistent offense just because they're so predicated around the power game. And there hasn't been a ton of that. Now, Sanchez and Andujar have both hit a lot of home runs lately, which helps the situation. Judge has been pretty good. Stanton is obviously a little streaky as well. We know how how good he can be and has been at various points this season. But outside of them, Gleyber Torres, the power has pretty much disappeared from his game. He's been hitting with a decent average. He's in the 270s, I believe, but he only has 3 home runs on the season. And this is a guy who hit 38 home runs in 2019. It's a stark drop, a precipitous drop in his power game, which is definitely contributing to the Yankees' lack of offense here a little bit, or lack of home runs. And we have to talk about DJ LeMahieu a little bit, who's just been okay so far this season. The Yankees have relied on him for so much, where he was an MVP candidate his first couple years with the Yankees, and he's re-signed for 6 years, and he's just regressed to a middle of the pack leadoff hitter for the most part. And that's going to need to change, because he's that one guy who can consistently make contact, or at least could previously hit for a higher batting average, runners in scoring position. He was the exception to that rule, and the Yankees relied on him for so much. Now, really quick with the rotation, Garrett Cole has been very good, like he usually is. Domingo Germán, for the most part, has pitched pretty well. Same with Jordan Montgomery. I wouldn't call pitching the major problem, but yeah, that Corey Kluber injury really, really hurt. He right after the no-hitter, he's out for at least 2 months. The Jameson Taillon experiment is not off to a good start. He is really frustrating me, and he bottomed out big time in his most recent appearance. And outside of that, it's difficult, because Davy Garcia was one option previously, but he is really, really struggling. He made 2 bad starts in the majors so far this year. He's given up 10 runs in his last 2 starts in AAA. So that is a concerning sign. He is not an option right now to come up and take his place. And the other guy that the Yankees were waiting on, kind of the forgotten man here, is Luis Severino, who is making a rehab start. And unfortunately, he's going to be pushed back at least a month due to a groin injury after the Tommy John surgery. So whatever in-house reinforcements the Yankees might have been hoping for, they're not coming anytime soon. So unless they make a move here, they're basically stuck with what they have right now.
Yeah, it was devastating seeing Luis Severino come off the mound there in his AAA start. I mean, the guy, he's been through so much. The Tommy John surgery, then he gets the groin injury. It was someone that you thought was going to come back to the rotation and really make an impact, maybe as like a deadline piece you didn't have to acquire, someone that you could just bring into your rotation and help you. But it's been tough. And then going back on the offense, DJ LeMahieu, he looks lost right now. And I mean, he is what he was when he was in Colorado, which is a guy that, I mean, the average is pretty much there, but the power department's up and down. He's that guy that you thought that he was going in. And I saw something on TikTok about this offense and the way it was constructed. And you look back at the Yankees history, Yankee Stadium, right? The old one and the new one has a short right field. And you look at all the successful Yankees teams, the old days, Gehrig, Ruth, Mantle, switch hitter, Reggie Jackson, everyone left-handed, puts the ball in the porch in right field, hits big home runs. And then you look at the teams that had success. Mark Teixeira, left-handed switch hitter, blah, blah, blah. They bring in Curtis Granderson. They have a bunch of left-handed guys. Nick Swisher looked good there. Robinson Cano. They need left-handed power to win at Yankee Stadium. And Brian Cashman seems to forget that, because he's had a right-hand dominant lineup for about 5 years now, and he hasn't had any success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely something to be said for that. You can look back through the Yankee history and name any number of guys. You did a good job with plenty of them. One of the guys I grew up with for a while was Jason Giambi, who was a similar player. So I understand the point completely. The last few years, the power has still been there. The Yankees set a major league record for home runs a couple years ago. So it's not that they can't hit home runs, but to me, it's more just about having the balance in the lineup. It'll make them more difficult to face as a pitcher. And that doesn't even come into play with the sticky substances they're trying to get rid of. So anyway, separate argument. The only move the Yankees have made so far this year to try to get some power from the left side has been Rougned Odor. And I wanted to bring him up next because, frankly, I'm ready for that experiment to end. I haven't enjoyed it very much. He's hitting 180. He's hit 5 home runs, and he's not a very good defender. And the Yankees, with Luke Voit out again after a brief return, DJ LeMahieu is primarily playing first base, where he's not quite as valuable defensively. The versatility is there, but he's a better defender at second base. And then Odor has been playing a lot more at second with LeMahieu at first, and he's just not a very good defensive player. Never has been, even in his prime. So there's just a couple of things there. the Yankees have struggled to get production from the first base spot all season. Voit wasn't very good in the handful of games he has played. LeMahieu's just been okay. Chris Gittens, who's recently called up as one hit, it was a nice home run, but I don't think he's a long-term solution regardless because Voigt's going to be back soon. He's on a rehab assignment. I wanted to switch really quick to the bullpen, which for the most part has been good. Even Chapman, he was off to a fantastic start. Outside of one horrible appearance against the Twins, he has been very, very good all season, including somehow locking down a save tonight where with the Yankees were up one and there were second and third against him with nobody out in the ninth, somehow managed to wriggle out of it. But he's been good. Zach Britton finally came back earlier this week after missing the first 60 games. He should help reinforce the bullpen where Chad Green and Jonathan Loizaga and even lesser guys like Lucas Litke have been pretty good for the most part. And Darren O'Day eventually is going to come back as well. It's kind of easy to forget he's on the Yankees right now. So I'm not super concerned about the bullpen. Theoretically, once Britton and O'Day get reacclimated to pitching in the majors, they should only improve what's already a strength of the team. It's the starting rotation. I'm curious to see if the Yankees make any moves. And I'm also really curious here coming up on the trade deadline in 6 weeks, what they're going to do to try to upgrade that center field position. With Aaron Hicks out for the year, Brett Gardner is the primary center fielder right now, and I think he's better suited in left. And also with Clint Frazier, now even without Hicks, Miguel Andujar, a guy who couldn't even play good defense at third, has taken over your starting job in the outfield. So that's not a great sign. I mean, I was one of those guys who thought this would be the year Frazier finally breaks out. He did have a big double the other night, but I don't think he's ever going to crack the Yankees starting lineup consistently.
Yeah, it's rough, man. I don't believe at all in Clint Frazier and what he's been able to do. But I like your point on the bullpen. There's enough depth there that you don't need to be worried about any hiccups because I mean, if someone ends up being bad, you have enough depth to just bring someone up, DFA the guy, and move on because there's so much depth in that bullpen. And the rotation, I think they will end up adding a starter. And I'm going to go in a different direction. You're ready for Rougned Odor to be over. You're looking at DJ playing first base. I want them to call up the Pittsburgh Pirates and bring in Adam Frazier, the kid that's second baseman, left-handed bat, hitting 330 this year. If he plays that short porch to his advantage, I think he could probably hit 15 home runs. Not in 2 months, but end up hitting enough home runs. His power numbers would go up going to Yankee Stadium. And he's a guy that can play defense, add some versatility, can play left field a little bit. And I think he's just someone you could add to that team. And I mean, center field, I can't really think of any names right now off the top of my head, but I think there's definitely some phone calls to be made for Brian Cashman.
I think the main center fielder off the top of my head would be Starling Marte with the Marlins, but he's not a left-handed bat. So, I think he could provide some contact and much better defense. There's a lot of options. Now, we'll get into the Cubs in a minute. Since we're not sure what they're going to do at the deadline, you guys want to sell Rizzo off?
I don't think so. I think Rizzo's going to stay put, but I mean, I also think Starling Marte is going to stay put. To be honest, I think the Marlins don't trade anybody. They're in a place right now. Pablo Lopez is pitching well. I know they just got swept by the horrendous Cardinals, but the Marlins, I tell you, I don't think that they're too far away from being competitive, especially in the NL East that has been disappointing so far this year. And that's where I'm going to switch over to the Mets because the NL East, we talk right there. The Mets are atop of that division, and they're looking pretty good. Jacob deGrom, holy smokes, you have been historic. Historic. He's got more RBIs than earned runs. Added that to that total on Wednesday night. And he also had to leave his start early. For 2 straight starts, he's left. Had an elbow issue or a forearm issue the last time. Leaves tonight's start after 3 innings, 8 strikeouts. He was probably going to have a historic outing. You had guys like Jose Lobaton in the lineup and a bunch of scrappy players for the Cubs, Bryant, Contreras, all of them on the bench for tonight's game. And he was probably well on his way to a perfect game. 8 strikeouts to 3 innings. That guy was nuts. And I think it's time to be concerned if you're the Mets right now with Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, not concerned about his performance. Let's clarify that. Let's be concerned about his injuries and leaving 2 consecutive starts early. And he's left a couple other starts early previously too. So if you're the Mets, obviously, I think you want to find answers. You want to if there is something wrong with him, you hope that it's minor and that you hope that it can just Fine, if he has to miss or start or two, whatever, to just get him back to 100%. If it's that simple, obviously the Mets would do it. But I honestly don't think it's that simple. Otherwise, there would have been a fix by now, or there would have been a more consistent diagnosis. And on the other hand, the Mets are not going to take Jacob deGrom out of the rotation unless they absolutely have to. And why would they? The guy has an ERA of 0.54. He's been absurd. He's literally has more RBIs than earned runs allowed this season. He had another RBI in today's game, if I'm not mistaken. It's just, it's insane, man. And he's doing enough for the run support himself, starting to get some from the offense, where he has just been dominant. And the 3 innings he threw earlier tonight were more of the same. With the Mets here, they have had a laundry list of injuries, and they are, while the division they play in has been bad, they're still the only team over 500. I think we have to give Luis Rojas and company some credit for weathering that storm. And even without Carlos Carrasco, who's going to be out for a while, the Mets starting pitching has been fantastic. Again, that's been the strength of their team for years. Ignoring DeGrom for a second, or looking past him, better way to put it, Taijuan Walker has been outstanding. He was signed late in the spring. He has been outstanding all season. Had a fantastic start against the Cubs earlier in this series. Marcus Stroman's had a very good year as well. Even Joey Lucchesi has been a decent starting pitcher for them after all of his middling years in San Diego. So that has absolutely been the strength of the Mets team here, and they can ride that pitching rotation at the very least into the playoffs.
Yeah, that pitching rotation has been nuts. Absolutely nuts. And to your point on Taijuan Walker, that's the best signing in free agency this year. No doubt about it. No questions asked with that. And not to mention, I can't remember the diagnosis on Noah Syndergaard, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be back at some point this year. And if you end up getting Noah Syndergaard late and add him to that rotation, whether it's August, September, whenever he comes back, you're having DeGrom, Walker, Syndergaard, and even if you got to go to a fourth, you got Stroman. So, I mean, you got answers right there. And maybe they do something the way the Cardinals did a few years ago with Wainwright coming off his Achilles. Maybe you stick Syndergaard's flame-throwing abilities in the bullpen. That would be lights out.
It would be an interesting thing, but Syndergaard honestly has got a similar issue to what Severino had for the Yankees. They both had Tommy John at a similar time. Syndergaard had a rehab start about 2 weeks ago where he left after an inning with another concern with his elbow, which is much more concerning. And the Mets said, last I heard, they're hoping he can come back in September. So that's not really a great sign. I think if he does come back, he'll likely pitch out of the bullpen. We've seen a handful of guys do that in the past. The starting pitchers come back late in the year, pitch out of the bullpen a little bit. I remember Tim Lincecum doing it for the Giants about 7 years ago, I believe, during their last World Series run. So there is precedent for that. And then you mentioned Stroman. Carlos Carrasco should also come back as well. So the starting pitching depth has been there. And the Mets are down to the 4th, 5th, 6th option at a couple different positions. One guy I want to give a quick shout out to who's filled in very nicely is Billy McKinney, the outfielder, who previously started off with the Yankees very briefly, was traded to Toronto where he lasted for a couple of seasons. And he is filled in very nicely with the Mets, thrown into a pretty important role due to all the injuries. He's really stepped up, and that Mets lineup is finally starting to settle in a little bit. There's definitely still some concern, but as some guys start to come back and settle in, the Mets are starting to score more runs.
Yeah, McKinney deserves some praise, and he's a former Cubs farm hand, and he's been killing the Cubs. I'm telling you, he kills the Cubs, and it pisses me off because it's not just now. It's not just in 2021. He's done it with 2 teams in 2021 against the Cubs. Now, he was originally a Cubs farm hand, shipped to the Yankees in the Aroldis Chapman deal with Torres, with Adam Warren, and they ended up getting Aroldis Chapman in that deal, of course. Then the Yankees end up sending him to Toronto, you said, right? That was the J. Happ deal.
Yes,
and then
sir.
he ends up getting DFA'd, goes to Milwaukee. He's on the Brewers this year, sits as they have their outfield injuries with Lorenzo Cain, Jackie Bradley, Christian Yelich. He comes off the bench in the series against the Cubs early this year. RBI double left field drives in the winning run. And then he's doing it again here with the Mets. So kudos to Billy McKinney for not performing well enough to stick in the Cubs organization and to also have a solid big league career whenever you play your former draftee team. But anyway, they're getting 2 rehab assignments taking place this week. You're getting Brandon Nimmo out on the rehab, and you're getting Michael Conforto. When they get those guys back, with the way Pete Alonso's been swinging the bat as of late, this Mets team's going to be pretty good.
Oh, absolutely. I think they already are pretty good. And Alonso's that right-handed power bat, and you get Nimmo and Conforto, two left-handed bats that can provide him with both some protection and some balance, where you can alternate those three guys in the lineup, making any relief pitcher's job much more difficult whenever they come in, especially with the three-batter minimum, where you can't mix and match anymore. So the Mets do have that balance in the lineup where they're going to be very difficult to face, and I do expect some improvement. Now, I do expect some improvement from the other teams in the National League East as well, especially the Braves and the Phillies. The Marlins, as much as talent as you said they have, they're in last place and they're not really that close. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I think they might sell. Who knows? I do expect some improvement from the division. It has to come eventually, you would think, but I do still think the Mets would be the favorite overall as they get healthier. And I've definitely been very impressed with them, especially weathering the storm of all these injuries. I do think we need to talk about one area of concern you could argue for them is that bullpen. That has been very inconsistent and tricky all year.
Yeah, Familia, I think Mets fans have had it with that guy. I mean, Yuri's Familia the other night walked so many batters, ended up giving up a lead, and he was just an absolute disaster. And he's someone that obviously in his early years of his best, a closer, lockdown guy. Him and Henry Mejia, who got a permanent ban from MLB baseball, if you remember that. But
Mm-hmm.
also those were the two young guys. But right now, you bring in Trevor May. He's been up and down. He had a bad outing as of late out of the bullpen. He gave up a home run to Rizzo, home run to Wisdom. We'll get into the Cubs here in a second. But that bullpen, to your point, Edwin Diaz has been pretty solid. And outside of him, I think it's really been a question mark. Jacob Barnes ended up getting DFA'd, and after giving up the grand slam to Tatis, welcome to free agency there, Jacob Barnes. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty dwindling. But then again, they're still in first place.
They are, but it is something they need to look out for here coming into the trade deadline, going into any playoff games. They have a ridiculous amount of starting pitching depth. I think the Mets, as they're currently constructed, would probably approach the games in a more old-fashioned way, get the starters as deep into the games as possible. And I do like watching games like that, but that's not always an effective strategy in the playoffs if they don't have a couple of reliable guys out of the bullpen. And I'm sure someone will become available, and I have no doubt that the Mets are going to pursue them given their lofty title aspirations and their financial assets they have now. They will go out and get somebody if they become available or if they think they're needed, or even just to prevent them from going to another team. The Mets do have that sort of financial power now. So I expect them to be aggressive here soon enough. If they're not, they also have that starting pitching depth. If Syndergaard or Carrasco end up pitching out of the bullpen in the playoffs, you can get a lot of length from those guys. So there's a lot of options there. They're in good shape for now. And as much as I hate to admit it, they should only get better as they get healthier as we move forward.
Yeah, and Francisco Lindor's been hitting well too. So, I mean, looking at a team that has bullpen depth now and doesn't have the rotation depth, we'll talk about the Chicago Cubs, who are down 3 games to none in this series against the beloved New York Mets. And you're looking at the game 4 game that's going to take place. Kyle Hendricks is getting the baseball. And I think this is a game that Cubs are probably going to win to survive the sweep. Now, they swept the Mets at home, and the Mets are 1 game away from sweeping the Cubs at home. So, tale of two cities there as you look at both of these teams when they play each other this year. But looking at the Cubs, the rotation scares me. And right now it's banged up. Trevor Williams, appendicitis. Jake Arrieta's been very up and down. And outside of that, I mean, Kyle Hendricks has been good. Zach Davies has been very good as of late. 207 ERA in the month of May. But once again, they're all throwing 88 miles an hour. I don't like that at all because with Wrigley Field, if the wind's blowing out, if you hang something over the heart of the plate, sayonara, baby. It's on the wavelength. So definitely not a method for success, but the lineup has been pretty good.
Well, it's not the velocity that concerns me too much. If you throw 100 over the middle of the plate, it's going to get hit on a wavelength. So I do think that's overblown slightly, but it's not really the velocity I look at. The starting pitching has been inconsistent all year, and I think some of that should be expected, considering the Yu Darvish trade and that Zach Davies was the main return. We know how inconsistent that Alec Mills can be, despite the talent when he's been back and forth, right? And with Williams as well. There's something I noticed when kind of preparing for this episode tonight. on the season, no Cubs starter has an ERA below 4. That includes Davies and Hendricks. So while they have both been better of late, and I do expect somebody to get below 4 eventually, the Cubs have not had a consistently reliable starter so far this season. I do expect that to start to change. They could end up with 2, but I do think the third and fourth starters, if they do end up getting to a potential playoff series, would be an area of concern. So that's something I definitely wanted to mention. But we do have to give them some praise where it's due here. That bullpen has been electric.
It has. And one more thing on the rotation. Adbert Alzolay is also on the injured list, got a blister. He looked good so far this season. He had that bad outing in San Francisco where the blister really started to form, and then it just really went downhill from there. Had trouble with the walks, but excited to see him get back here soon too. But the bullpen, to your credit, has been nice. Keegan Thompson, it's the young kids that are stepping up. Justin Steele, who's on the shelf right now too. That's one thing about the Cubs. They got a lot of injuries too, but you look, it's not necessarily there. The bullpen guys that have really been stepping up, Ryan Tepera, someone that they signed who got an MVP vote last year, believe it or not. He's been phenomenal as a setup man. Andrew Chafin, he's got the mustache, the old thing going on with him there. And then you're getting Daniel Winkler with an ERA of 0.58. I'm pretty sure that matches Jacob deGrom, so suck on those apples. But other than that, I mean, the Cubs bullpen has been very good. Tommy Nance has been good, and Craig Kimbrell has been the best Craig Kimbrell I've ever seen.
Well, if you're telling New York to suck on those apples, I'm sure they would tell you to suck on that one big apple, considering you lost the first 3 games of the series there, bud.
Yeah.
But I do agree with the point overall, man. The bullpen has been lights out. I wanted to mention Tepera and Chafin and Kimbrell specifically. This is the Craig Kimbrell the Cubs were trying to bring in a couple years ago in the middle of the season. I believe his ERA is 0.66, if I checked correct. I mean, this is the Kimbrell we have seen previously with the Braves and the Padres and the Red Sox, the dominant, potentially Hall of Fame closer that we've seen for several years. And if he keeps this up, and I have no reason to doubt that he will, that the 9th inning should be in the best hands the Cubs have had in several years. So that's absolutely a fantastic thing for them. Now going forward, I do think the bullpen will be a strength of the team. We might see a little bit of regression from a couple of guys just because it's bound to happen eventually. But I still expect the Cubs to end up with one of the upper echelon bullpens in the National League at the very least. That is a very important weapon for them to have, considering they don't typically get a ton of innings from their starters. There are exceptions, of course. I don't expect Alzolay to be a guy that gets a ton of innings right away while he learns to command a little bit. He's got talent, but for now, I think 5-6 innings would be his ceiling, right? So it definitely begs a lot of questions as to how the Cubs are going to approach the trade deadline with how the organization's being run right now. But I do want to talk about the lineup a little bit as well. Some of these long-term core players, Chris Bryant, I know he's out for a day or two with the bruised thumb on the hit by pitch, but him and Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, we're seeing a lot of production from those guys.
We are. They're stepping up. Chris Bryant the most. And I want to bring up a stat on Chris Bryant. He's played 2 games at third base, not start, but 2 games playing third base with a third base glove, standing at third base, playing the position twice since April 20th. 2 times. This guy's been in left. He started 20 games in center field. He's played right field. He's been all over the diamond. And if you want the Yankees to acquire a center fielder, you should be calling the Cubs because his contract's ticking. But anyway, he's done a great job this year. Rizzo battled it back. He's back to swinging the bat well, has 2 homers in this Mets series so far, and he's really into a groove. And Baez, I mean, he still chases the balls outside, but that's what you're going to get from him. His average has been up and down. It's been as high as 285 this year, as low as 230. He's sitting around 235, 236 right now, but he plays great defense, and those 3 guys are the main core pieces. But there's been injuries to this offense. David Bodie, he doesn't bring anything, but he's still injured. Matt Duffy, 282 when he hit the shelf. Nico Horner, talented young second baseman, he's been hurt. Hayward's missed time. Happ's missed time. Everybody's missed time, but everybody is stepping up. Patrick Wisdom has an incredible story. First round pick of the Cardinals, 9 home runs across 2 weeks. That's insane. And then you look at second base, Sergio Alcantara, switch hitter there at second. He's been fantastic. He has 7 extra base hits in his first week with the ball club. So he's done great things. Eric Sogard pisses me off because he doesn't know how to play baseball. But outside of that, this Cubs lineup has been very good, and I expect that to continue as they get healthy. It's just the rotation that scares me down the stretch.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of a deja vu moment here, at least with the lineup part of that. I feel like we had a similar conversation 5 minutes ago, but I agree, man. I mean, we've definitely seen the core pieces. We haven't mentioned Wilson Contreras yet, who's also having a solid season. Some of the more established players in the Cubs lineup have been productive, which is fantastic. But Patrick Wisdom deserves his own shout out here. We haven't talked about him yet. Where the hell did he come from, man? I remember him very briefly playing for Texas last year. Not only has he shown up with the injuries to Duffy and Bodie and everybody, but he had that otherworldly kind of like when Jeff Francoeur started with the Braves a long
Yeah.
time ago. Yeah, where he was just on fire for a few weeks, and it just Wisdom's enjoying that kind of initial burst of success in a big market right now. It's been a fun story, and he's absolutely earned some recognition from us here. Now, eventually he will probably start to regress a
Yes.
little bit. But I'll believe it when I see it, the way he's been hitting. But he's been a breath of fresh air, a burst of energy, that kind of the spark that the Cubs have needed to help weather the storm of the injuries there. And over the Cubs, if I'm not mistaken, are tied for first place at the moment. He's definitely helped keep them afloat here, because the Cubs have been a pretty streaky team in the last couple of weeks. They had the sweep of the Cardinals, who have been slumping recently, but then they've lost 3 straight to the Mets now. There was a losing streak before the Cardinals series. So what would you be looking for in order to be a little bit more consistent here going forward?
I look at this Cubs team as a whole and think of it as a relationship. Think of it as it's going well. You started the season. Now, you weren't sure at first, right? As the season's going on, you weren't sure at first. Are they the one? Are they the one? Then you end up saying yes, and everything starts to get going. More people are supporting you. Everyone's all about it. Things are going well. Things you didn't expect to happen are happening. Everything is fantastic. Then there's a couple of bumps in the roads. You notice some red flags, but you're trying to be blind to them because everyone's going well. They play so well when they're at home, right? They're so good at 24-10 at Wrigley Field, and they're so good. Everything's well, but then you see these little bumps and the red flags, and you still are trying to ignore them. Pretty soon, you're not going to be able to ignore them, or they will eventually go away, and you'll bring up your problems to your team, and it will end up being good for the team to where you can end up going on and have a happy life and maybe end with a ring on your finger. But if not, then you will end up being completely screwed and everything will fall apart. Right now, I don't know which one to believe, but if it does fall apart, it better fall apart in the next 3 weeks so we can end up selling some people at the deadline and not fall apart in September like they did under Joe Madden.
Interesting. That was definitely an analogy I wasn't expecting to hear tonight. But let me drop a little Patrick wisdom on you here, really quick.
Nice.
If you're looking at the Cubs through rose-colored glasses, those red flags are just going to look like flags, and you're not going to see the issues, right? Oh yeah, you see that? I
There's a
can do
W
that
on the
too.
flags.
What was that?
There's a W on the flags.
I don't know about that. If they're not the rose-colored glasses, got to think about that. Anyway,
Yeah.
the Cubs are in a very interesting spot here going forward. It's going to be a little bit difficult for them to be consistent because, well, first of all, the top 4 teams in the NL Central are only separated by about 3 or 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. And they have a lot of games against each other remaining. Milwaukee and Cincinnati have been good lately. Obviously, they're due for some regression. And the Cubs, like you mentioned, if they're going to sell, they almost need to play poorly the next couple of weeks in order to justify that, right? Because Wrigley Field just opened back up to 100% capacity, and the crowds are electric. The Cubs are playing pretty good baseball overall, but I don't see them being that team that can go over the top as they currently are constructed. And you've got a couple of these core players last year, their contracts. We'll dive into this more here in the upcoming weeks here as we wrap up the hockey and basketball talk and get closer to the trade deadline. But they're coming up to a very, very important crossroads as to how the future of the Chicago Cubs is going to go.
Yeah, they are. It's gonna be something. It kind of reminds me the way the White Sox were a few years ago, and now their stuff is built all the way back up. And you talk about a streaky player like Patrick Wisdom. I think you're kind of seeing the things with Yermin Mercedes right now, where he started off with a great year and then ended up going down just a little bit. Now, Yermin, we all love Yermin. He's such a great energy guy. Wears the chain, tells Tony La Russa to stick it. I love that guy. But the White Sox have been playing fantastic baseball. The bullpen blew it a little bit today, but that's when you needed Yasmani Grandal to drive in a game-winning run in the 10th inning, and he did that. So they ended up winning the game, no questions asked. Good teams find a way to win, and Tony La Russa is pushing all the right buttons right now.
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, I still don't love that hire and fit, but how can you really argue when the White Sox have the best record in the majors? They could very well be the best team in the major leagues. And like the Mets before them, the White Sox have had a lot of injuries, especially in the lineup. They've been missing Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, and Nick Madrigal is out for the rest of the season. There have absolutely been some important injuries to this team, but guys have stepped up. Andrew Vaughn is starting to get, he has that everyday role at the moment, and he has filled in very well. Yeah, he's not a left fielder by trade, but he has really filled in that role nicely. We're seeing some good production out of Jake Lamb, the former Diamondback. And by the way, I'm sure he's got to be happy to be out of Arizona right now. But we've seen these guys step in, similar to some of the replacements on the Cubs and the Mets, and be not only there and reliable, but impactful players who have helped lead the team to wins. The White Sox just came off a series win over the Rays, where they overtook them for the best record in the league. And again, as a Yankee fan, thank you for that. But the White Sox have been dominating both with the lineup and the pitching, which is a very, very dangerous combination, obviously. Really quick with the starting lineup, or the starting rotation, Lance Lynn and Carlos Rodon have been out of this world. And the fact that Giolito and Keuchel and Cease have been pretty good and they've been worse by comparison, that's really dangerous.
Yeah, and to your point there with the record situation being the best in the American League, this is from Jesse Rogers from ESPN. The White Sox have the best record in baseball, 43-25, at this point in the season for the first time since 2005, which is the last time they won the World Series. They walked off the Rays 8-7 and 10. Tampa's first series loss since May 11th through the 13th. So great job there for the White Sox in what they've been doing as of late. And going back to the rotation, they have been lights out. And Dylan Cease has looked really good. And he's someone that, I mean, he's had a few bad starts. He's had trouble with ball four a couple times, but he's been solid. And I think any of those pitchers right now, you put them on the Cubs, they're the ace. So that speaks to Rick Hahn, the way he's developed it. Liam Hendricks has been a great addition too, a great closer there for them. And it seems like they just have everything going right for them. And Yohan Moncada is starting to swing the bat just a little bit better. And this team is looking good despite their injury problems.
Yeah, pretty much everyone but Adam Eaton has been productive all season. He's been the one guy where you could be, he hasn't been great so far, but frankly, it hasn't really mattered. I don't think it has. I do believe in him enough where he'll turn it around a little bit. And even if he doesn't, the White Sox have a very good amount of depth at all areas in the roster. I do think they might look into fortifying the bullpen a little bit, as solid as it's been. We've seen the talent from, Aaron Bummer's been consistent like usual. We could see what Garrett Crochet can do. You obviously have to safeguard for any injury to Michael Kopech because he's been in and out of the rotation and bullpen for multiple years now. So I do expect them to be aggressive. I expect them to go all in at the deadline, and they have enough organizational pieces where they can do that. And then if it doesn't work out, or even if it does, they'll be in position to run it back next year with mostly the same core. So that is a very good problem to have, a very envious situation for the other 29 teams in the majors. This is a team that is starting to pull away in their division. I believe they're 5 games up on Cleveland. I wouldn't really call Detroit or Kansas City threats, and the Twins have been the biggest disappointment in baseball so far this season. So if the White Sox have no excuse not to win their division at the very least, and start the playoffs with home field advantage, maybe have it throughout the playoffs. I don't think it's unreasonable to say this team can do what the 2005 team did and win a World Series. I'm not guaranteeing it, but unless something really drastic changes, they should be one of the favorites to do so.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking good. And the outfield right now, we do need to talk about their injuries a little bit. Yeah, the second baseman, of course, there with Nick Madrigal ended up blowing out the hamstring completely. Not just a strain, torn hamstring. That's got to be painful. But anyway, he's on the shelf, 60-day IL, ended up having surgery earlier this week, and he is now done for the season officially. So Leury Garcia, I could expect to take some time there at second base. And the outfield, Eloy Jimenez is coming back. He's finally doing some baseball activities, probably a 3-week rehab assignment, they said. Really needs to move around a bit in the outfield. So he's probably going to be up August-ish, maybe July, something like that. So he will be back to the ball club here shortly. and no update on Luis Robert right now. So I mean, they lost Billy Hamilton too, the center fielder that really stepped up and found how to hit a ball out of the ballpark, which he hasn't been able to do in years. But anyway, yeah, ever. But looking at this team, I think they've done a great job with everything. There's nothing really more to say. If they wanted to just try to go to win a World Series, I think they should also call Pittsburgh for Adam Frazier. Maybe get them that left-handed bat that can play second base because they're sort of right-hand dependent there. I think they could use another left-handed bat consistently in that lineup.
I think that's fair. It's definitely not as drastic of a problem as it is with the Yankees, but Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, as great as they are right-handed batters. The balance will never hurt. With Billy Hamilton being out, the White Sox have gotten some production from Adam Engel as well. So it's been all over the place. They have had guys fill in and be effective. So we're talking giving them so much praise. I still, I want to throw a slight wet blanket on it. There are a couple of teams they would have to get through. I do think the bullpen could use a little improvement. And if Adam Eaton is listening to this, you need to step it up, man, because you're the clear weak spot on a very strong team that's playing very good baseball right now. But ever since the Yankee series, which was the one exception really for the White Sox, they've been absolutely dominant and they're beating good teams. And that is a fantastic sign for them. Now, outside the pitching staff, for the most part, has been healthy, especially the starting rotation. Hopefully that continues for them because if that's, I think, is the major key to their success. They do have some depth in the pitching staff, but definitely not the same riches that a team like the Mets does. So it could get to a point where if one of their starters suffers a significant injury, that absolutely would be something they would need to address because I don't think anyone wants to bring Reynaldo Lopez back.
Yeah, I don't think we want to see duck lips on the mound anytime soon because he is so, you talk about up and down. That guy's a roller coaster every time he takes the mound. But that's going to do it for today. I thought it was, we talked a lot of baseball, got hockey and basketball in there. Gerard Gallant, of course, the Rangers head coach. Talk Nets, talk Islanders. Next week, we're going to recap more of those series. Potentially, the Nets should be moving on. The Islanders will figure out what's going on in that series as well. And some more baseball talk, depending on, we might have some NFL news that breaks. You never know. So we'll stay tuned on that. But until next time, check us out everywhere. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that fun stuff. We're on all platforms. That's the beauty of this. So be sure to check us out. And until next time, I'm Dylan Kearns with Swig. We will see you next time.